Alright, so if we hit play and we look at where we were at last time, you can see that our cylinder moves in one direction, even outside of our level that we created. What we want to do is flip-flop between two different directional points. Alright, so let's go ahead and open up our cylinder blueprint. And out here, let's go to the very end by our set actor transform. Let's go ahead and compile this and save it. Make sure that we're cleaned out. So I'm going to go ahead and grab out two directions. I'm going to hit set because we want to change the value of these guys. And what I'm going to do is change the y on this one to a -10. And then I'm going to change this one to a +10. Again, compiling and saving. Next thing I'm going to do is right click and go to my flip-flop node. And I'm going to connect my A value here to this, and then my B value this. And so that what that'll do is that'll flip between each one. And then what I want to do is I'm going to have a delay, and that's going to slow it down. And what we'll do is right click here, type in delay. Let's kind of move these guys out. And what we can do with this node is we can delay between the flips. So for example, let's start off with 6 here, and we'll complete it here and click on that. I'm going to compile this, save again. Let's go back to our first person example and let's press play. You can see it moves to the right, and maybe the delay is too long. There we go, and it moves to the left. So we've got our very basic shooting game moving between those two values. Alright, so let's move this guy over a little bit here and back. Now the next thing I want to show you really quickly is you'll notice that if I drag this guy in, it's going to inherit all of the same qualities as this one. So if I press play, notice that now I have two. That's kind of the power behind BluePrints. So I know this is a pretty short video, but I think that's good for now. And what we'll do in the next video is look at adjusting our player controller. It takes our -10 and it converts it to a steady value over time. So let's go ahead and drag this out and then name it normalize. Alright, there's our, this is a pretty simple function that'll normalize it for us. So the next thing we need to do is do this by delta time. Now, if you think about frames per second as it relates to video games and stuff, you might have 30 frames per second, you might have 120, and oftentimes they allow you to adjust the quality within a game because based on the video card, you get a different frame rate. What delta time does is it normalizes the frame rate based on whatever the current time is of the system and the average of the memory based on the video card. So what we're going to do is grab speed from here, and we want to multiply this by delta time. So I'm going to right click up here, I'm going to type get world delta in seconds, and we want to multiply these by each other. So I'm just going to right click and type in MUL, and let's do multiply. Actually, we can just drag out here and do multiply this way. We'll do float by float. Let's try that. Float, there we go, times float. And then let's multiply that times our speed, which is a float. So now what we need to do is take these two values and multiply them by the current location. So what this static mesh component is referring to is the actual cylinder in our scene. So when I drag this out this way, so what we want to do now is get the world location of this. So I'm going to drag this out. I'm going to type in get world. So we'll do get world location. Or we can do get world transform. So what this is going to do is get the current position or transform position of our static mesh component. And we don't want to affect the rotation because we want it to go back and forth. So the next thing we want to do is break down the transform into its X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to grab this, and there's a break transform, excuse me, which is here. So here you can see location, rotation, and scale. Zoom this out a little bit so you can see this. So let's go ahead and just sort of, I'm going to put this over here. I'm just sort of lining these up. Let's kind of move this off to the side to give us some more space. All right. The next thing I want to do is grab my make transform node. You'll notice here that this has the location, rotation, and scale. So all I have to do is grab location from here, rotation from here, and scale from here. And what we're doing is we're getting all of those things from our static mesh component. So next we need to multiply the direction of the vector and the speed. By multiplying those two, it'll give us the speed in which it's going to move. So we're just going to we're going to grab our normalize from here. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to drag out a float by float. So float times float. So I'm sorry, vector times float here. Boom. So there's our vector, and then we're going to drag our float going this way. And if kind of position these something like this, just so they're not all tangled. So you can see there. Let's move this back a little bit here. Now all we have to do is add the speed and direction to the current location we're at. So imagine that you're like sort of moving an object across by whatever the value is, as it's adding it, and that's what's going to actually move it. So remember, this is an X, Y, and Z. Each one of these has X, Y, and Z values. So we want a vector plus a vector. And here's vector type. So let's just do plus. Vector plus vector. Let's move this up here. And then what I'm going to do is take this location node and put it here. So now we're adding these two together. And then the location itself is going to be coming from this guy. So you can see here that here's our direction and speed. We're multiplying these two together, and we normalize it. And then that normalized value of the direction we're multiplying, and then we add that to the current position that our mesh is in. And then our make transform is what combines it. Now, we don't remember before that we created a event hit here. Now, we need an event to actually make things move. Before there was three. One of them was event tick. I didn't really go into detail, but event tick actually runs or ticks every frame. So we're going to be using this to move, to run the blueprint that we created earlier on every frame to move our object. So let's put this up here, and then the last thing we're going to do is set actor, and what we're setting is the transform. So set actor transform, and you can see here that it has new transform. It just means the new position, and then this is what's going to fire it off. Go ahead and compile it and save it, and what you'll see now, here I'm going to kind of drag this out a little bit. Hopefully you can see that. You can pause it and hopefully use that as a guide. But what it'll do now is it'll move in the left direction when I press play. You can see that it's moving on its own. There's only one problem. We need it to move back and forth. And we're already at the 11-minute mark, so we'll do that in the next video.